Mod 2, Lesson 4, page 53, Events in Europe. Many significant events took place in Europe in the 1500s. Disagreements about religion threw Europe into turmoil. Some of these disagreements eventually led to wars. At the same time, several European nations began to compete for land and power overseas. The Protestant Reformation. In 1517, a German priest named Martin Luther publicly criticized the Roman Catholic Church. Luther charged that the church was too wealthy and that it abused its power. Criticism like Luther started the Protestant Reformation. This religious movement began in small German towns but quickly spread to much of Europe. It became a part of many political disputes as well. The Protestants were reformers who protested some of the Catholic Church's practices. Many Protestants believed God meant for religion to be simple. The printing press, a machine that produces printed copies using movable types, helped spread the ideas of the Reformation. Protestants printed large numbers of Bibles as well as short essays explaining their ideas. This allowed more people to read and think about the Bible on their own, rather than relying solely on the teachings of a priest. Conflicts between Catholics and Protestants took place throughout Europe, often leading to civil war. In the late 1500s, French Catholics fought the French Protestants known as Huguenots. Many Huguenots eventually immigrated to the Americas in search of religious freedom. In 1534, King Henry VIII founded the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. By making himself the head of the church, Henry challenged the authority of the Pope and angered Catholics. Political issues soon became entangled with the religious struggles. Spain and England go to war. In the late 1500s, King Philip II used Spain's great wealth to lead a Catholic reformation against the Protestant movement. He hoped to drive the Protestants out of England. Standing in his way was the Protestant English Queen, Elizabeth I, and her sea dogs. Sea dogs was the name given to English sailors who raided Spanish treasure ships. The most successful and daring was Sir Francis Drake. Philip was angered by English piracy. He began gathering the Spanish Armada, a huge fleet of warships meant to end English plans. The Armada had about 130 ships and some 27,000 sailors and soldiers. This mighty fleet was launched to invade England and overthrow Queen Elizabeth and the Anglican Church. But in July 1588, the smaller but faster English fleet defeated the Armada in a huge battle. The Armada's defeat shocked the Spanish. In addition to the naval defeat, Spain's economy was in trouble. The gold and silver that Spain received from the Americas caused high inflation. Inflation is a rise in the price of goods caused by an increase in the amount of money in use. Economic problems in Spain, combined with the defeat of the Spanish Armada, led countries such as England, France, and the Netherlands to challenge Spanish powers overseas. Search for a Northwest Passage. Europeans wanted to find a Northwest Passage, a water route through North America that would allow ships to sail from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The English began sending explorers to find it. Italian sailor John Cabot knew that the King of England wanted to find such a route. Cabot offered to pay for his own expedition, asking only that the King of England grant him a royal charter to any lands he found. The king agreed, and Cabot made voyages to North America for England in 1497 and 1498. Cabot sailed to North America, but he left very few records of his journeys. It is believed that he traveled along the coast of present-day Newfoundland in Canada. Although Cabot did not find a passage to the Pacific Ocean, his voyages were successful. They became the basis of England's claim to land in North America. In 1524, France sent an Italian captain, Giovanni de Verrazano, to seek a Northwest Passage. Verrazano sailed along the coast of North America from present-day North Carolina to Maine. Jacques Cartier, a French sailor, led France's next major exploration of North America. He made 2 trips to what is now Canada. Cartier sailed into the St. Lawrence River and traveled all the way to present-day Montreal, claiming the areas he explored for France. The Dutch also entered the race. They hired English Captain Henry Hudson to find a Northwest Passage. Hudson first sailed to present-day New York in 1609. The following year, Hudson returned to North America, sailing under the English flag. He traveled far to the north. Eventually, he reached a strait that he hoped would lead to the Pacific Ocean. Instead, it led into a huge bay, later named Hudson Bay. None of these explorers ever found a Northwest Passage. Their explorations, however, led to increased European interest in North America. European presence in North America. The Spanish and the Portuguese were the early leaders in overseas exploration. They dominated the colonization of the New World through the 1500s. However, Spain and Portugal focused on Central America, the Caribbean, and South America. They left much of North America unexplored. The English, French, and Dutch explored North America. These nations then sought to expand their own empires there. As their empires grew throughout the 1500s and into the 1600s, Europeans acquired a new tool for understanding their world. The Mercator projection map had been created especially for sailors. Although the far northern and southern regions were distorted on the map, the regions where Europeans wanted to explore and claim land were shown fairly well. This map would have helped explorers plan their journeys. It also showed the vast areas where they might find great riches and expand their presence. English presence in the New World. In the late 1500s, England decided to set up a permanent settlement in North America. This colony was to establish an English presence in the New World. Sir Walter Raleigh received a charter, a document giving him permission to start a colony. In 1584, he sent an expedition that landed in present-day Virginia and North Carolina. Raleigh named the entire area Virginia. The following year, Raleigh sent another group to find a colony on Roanoke Island off the coast of North Carolina. The English colonists at Roanoke found life hard. They fought with Native Americans and had trouble finding and growing food. After only a year, the remaining colonists returned to England. John White, a talented artist, and 150 colonists resettled Roanoke in the spring of 1587. White's granddaughter, Virginia Dare, was the first English colonist born in North America. After a few months, White went back to England to get more supplies. War with Spain prevented White from returning for 3 years. When he came back, White found the colony deserted. The only clue he found to the fate of the colonists was the word Croatoan, the name of a nearby island carved into a post. Did the colonists try to escape a Native American attack by fleeing to the island, or did they intermarry and blend with the friendly Croatan tribe? White never found out. To this day, no one is certain what happened to the lost colony at Roanoke. French presence in the New World. France built its first North American settlement in Florida when Huguenots started a few small colonies there in 1564. The Spanish soon destroyed these settlements and drove out the French. Religious wars in France slowed further French efforts to colonize North America. When the religious conflicts ended, the French renewed efforts to settle present-day eastern Canada. The explorations of Jacques Cartier and Samuel de Champlain gave France a claim to this region. Nearly 70 years after Cartier sailed up the St. Lawrence, French sailor Samuel de Champlain began exploring North America. He recorded his ideas about European exploration in his journal. Through exploration, we gain knowledge of different countries, regions, and kingdoms. Through it, we attract and bring into our countries all kinds of riches. Through it, Christianity is spread in all parts of the earth. Champlain followed Cartier's old paths. Over the years, he made many journeys along the St. Lawrence River. He also visited the Great Lakes led by Native American guides. During his travels, Champlain met Native Americans called the Algonquin. Some Algonquins formed alliances with the French explorer. In 1608, Champlain founded a small colony on the St. Lawrence River. He named the colony Quebec. This trading post opened fur trading routes for the French throughout the region. Champlain's explorations became the basis of France's claim to much of Canada. In the late 1600s, the French began spreading out from the St. Lawrence River, calling their North American territory New France. French fur traders, explorers, and missionaries were all on the move. In the 1650s, French missionaries told stories about a beautiful river, large, broad, and deep. In 1673, explorer Louis Joliet and missionary Jacques Marquette set out to find this great river, the Mississippi. Hernando de Soto was the first European to find the Mississippi River in 1541. Joliet and Marquette reached the river and traveled down it as far as present-day Arkansas. 9 years later, René Robert de La Salle followed the Mississippi River to the Gulf of Mexico. He claimed the Mississippi Valley for King Louis XIV of France. To honor the king, La Salle named the region Louisiana. Starting in the 1700s, the French built new outposts. These included Detroit on the Great Lakes and St. Louis and New Orleans along the Mississippi River. Most towns in the French territory were small. As late as 1688, there were only about 12,000 French settlers in New France. Its small population and the value of the fur trade led French settlers to ally and trade with local Native American groups. Because of their close trading relationships, the French treated the Native Americans with more respect than some other European settlers had done. Some Algonquins allied with French settlers against English settlers and the Iroquois. In turn, many French settlers learned Native American language and even adopted their ways of life. Dutch presence in the New World. The English and the French were not the only European powers to seek an empire in North America. The Dutch, who had merchant fleets around the world, came in search of trade. They claimed the land between the Delaware and Hudson rivers and called it New Netherland. This area included parts of what is now New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Delaware. Dutch explorers and settlers encountered the Mohican or Mohican peoples, farmers who lived in large settlements of longhouses. At the center of the Mohican lands was the Hudson River. Conflicts with Dutch and other settlers pushed the Mohican eastward. In 1624, the newly formed Dutch West India Company sent about 30 families to settle in New Netherland. 2 years later, Peter Minuit bought Manhattan Island from local Native Americans. He paid with goods that today would be worth less than $1,100. Minuit then founded the town of New Amsterdam, today called New York City. To attract colonists, the Dutch allowed members of all religions to settle in their colony. Minuit also helped Swedish settlers found New Sweden along the Delaware River. The first settlement, Fort Christina, was begun in 1638. The Swedish settlement was small, but the Dutch felt that it threatened Dutch lands and fur trading. The two sides fought a series of battles. Finally, the governor of New Netherland, Peter Stuyvesant, conquered New Sweden in 1655. He allowed the Swedes to continue their colony, but he called it the Swedish nation. Summary and preview. The English, French, Dutch, and Swedish explored the North American continent and later established colonies there. In the next module, you'll learn how all of those colonies became English possessions.